Today, we're going to be looking at a video on whether being gay is a sin or not, but at the same time, we're going to learn how to spot bigotry over dogma. If you believe homosexuality is a sin because of dogma, it's impersonal. Even if you don't agree with it, you're expressing a belief system, not necessarily personal prejudice. Bigotry, on the other hand, is different. It's personal prejudice regardless of belief. Sometimes the two can look the same, and sometimes they're disguised so well that even the person expressing them doesn't realise it's bigotry. So the video is answering the question, is being gay a sin? Let's see how he begins, and maybe we can start filling in my corkboard here. But by the end, we'll see the difference whether it's dogma or bigotry.
In today's video, I'll answer your question, is being gay a sin? In order to answer the question, is being gay a sin, we need to challenge some assumptions upon which the question is based. Within the past 50 years, the term gay, as applied to homosexuality, has exploded into mainstream culture, and we are told that being gay is as much outside one's control as being short or having blonde hair.
So we have two claims here. Just going to go through them on the corkboard. With the gay wordplay here, the word gay began to acquire the meaning of homosexual in the late 19th century, becoming a coded term within the homosexual community, and gained wider usage and acceptance as a word for homosexual men in the mid-20th century, especially by the 1950s and 60s, a trend further solidified by the Stonewall Uprising in 1969. By the 1970s, gay was pretty well established by this point, so he's right, the past 50 years, the word gay has been used this way. Now, I find it strangely irrelevant, as the previous meaning for the word was basically happy or cheerful. It's obvious that that's not what's meant by the question. The intention is asking if homosexuality is a sin, not whether being happy is. It's like asking someone, did you have a terrific time out? And replying with, well, we need to make sure we're using the modern definition of terrific as the root word is terror. And it's likely that in history, terrific used to also have a similar negative intention. Of course not, that's not what's meant, that would be silly. It is always good to ensure everyone's on the same page before answering, but when it clearly isn't needed, this is just setting up for the idea that modern version of homosexuality is just a trend or some fad. A phase that exploded over this time. Now, the second claim here was that it's described as something outside of control, like being short or blonde hair. This is actually false. It's nothing like being short or blonde. Hormones have control over height, and there are some medical treatments that can cause height growth or prevent growth. And anyone can dye their hair if they wish. With homosexuality, there is even less control. If you're a homosexual man and have sex with a woman, you'd still be a homosexual. It's part of who you are. Thinking just with attraction, assuming you are a heterosexual person, can you imagine yourself being attracted to or sleeping with someone of the same sex, and it being a good experience? If not, now I want you to choose to have that be a good experience. Did I just turn you gay? No? You likely cannot do that, right? You can't choose to be homosexual. It's also not that hard to understand the experience in reverse, is it?
So the question is worded in a loaded way and impossible to adequately answer in that form. We need to break this question up and deal with each piece separately.
Actually, the question isn't loaded. You could say it's nuanced and requires a deeper understanding, or like he's about to do, a bit of reframing. This is how loaded language works.
Within the past 50 years, the term gay, as applied to homosexuality, has exploded into mainstream culture.
That's loaded language. The word exploded isn't a direct reference to anything, but it obviously isn't literal. It's loaded because other words would have been more accurate here, but instead he chose this word, which works well only to over-exaggerate the growth of homosexual acceptance and make it feel more sudden than it actually was. Asking, is being gay a sin, is a pretty simple and unbiased question. It's posed like curiosity and nothing more. Also, claiming it's impossible to answer is also wrong. It's a clear answer. No, being gay is not a sin. But acting on it is, in accordance with the Bible. It's like saying being thirsty is not a sin, but drinking the only drink that you like is. That's not an analogy for being gay, but, just the line of thinking.
Rather than ask, is being gay a sin, we need to ask, is it sinful to have same-sex attractions? And is it sinful to engage in homosexual activities because of those attractions?
Okay, so now we have a reframing, which is a good thing. He's clarifying the position because it's not a simple yes-no question to him or his belief. So the new questions are, is same-sex attraction a sin? And, are homosexual activities sinful? He's also doing this because he doesn't want to say that being gay is not a sin. I just thought I'd point that out.
Concerning the first question, is it sinful to have same-sex attractions? The answer is complicated. First, we should probably distinguish between actively sinning and passively being tempted. Being tempted is not a sin. Jesus was tempted, but he never sinned.
Oh wow, that's a funny little claim for my court board. That's going right here. Jesus never sinned? Now, I'll start by saying I haven't finished hearing this guy's complete view on homosexual activity. However, if he believes it to be a sin, there is no reason the other sins in the Bible shouldn't also be considered here. Number 1, working on the Sabbath. Jesus heals people on the Sabbath. Number 2, touching the dead. Jesus takes Jairus' daughter by the hand after she died, and touches the briar of the widow's son. Number 3, food laws. These are the animals you may eat, but you shall not eat the pig. It is unclean to you. Thus he declared all foods clean. The Greek text makes this explicit. Number 4, name-calling and anger. Jesus' own standard. Anyone who says, "You fool," will be in danger of the fire of hell. Yet Jesus said, "You blind fools." Number 5, associating with the unclean. Jesus constantly touches leopards and bleeding women, which according to the Bible are unclean people. Number 6, blasphemy. Whoever blasphemes the name of the Lord shall surely be put to death. Leviticus. Jesus calls himself one with the Father. His audience even explicitly states that this is blasphemy and tried to stone him for it. However, my favourite here is number 7, necromancy. Jesus not only said that he will rise again, but also brought others back from the dead as well. Number 1, Jairus' daughter. Number 2, a widow's son at Nain. Number 3, Lazarus of Bethany. By any definition, Jesus is a necromancer, even according to the Bible. So, not only was Jesus sinful as all of these others, but as a necromancer, this is another sin of his, and anyone who seeks Jesus would also be sinning as well.
Eve was tempted in the garden, and the forbidden fruit definitely appealed to her, but it seems that she did not actually sin until she took the fruit and ate it. A struggle with temptation may lead to sin, but the temptation itself is not a sin.
I do agree with this based on his meaning of sin. I personally don't think sin is a real concept, so I generally see it as a synonym to bad or evil, but sin means to go against God or God's law, more specifically to miss the mark, but that mark is God's law. He mentioned Eve earlier, and that's interesting to me because at this point we can argue about free will and such, but let's focus on the action. Eve ate the apple, which represented the knowledge of good and evil. Sin would be considered something not good, but at the very least closer to evil. Sure, God told her not to eat the apple. However, a talking snake told her to eat the apple. How was she to decide which message was good and which was bad? Either way, she'd have no way of knowing. It's obvious that a God is good, right? Well, maybe, but we only know this because Eve ate the apple. And she could only know this afterwards as well.
The problem with same-sex attraction or the feeling of being gay is that it is an attraction to something God has forbidden, and any desire for something sinful ultimately has its roots in sin. Our natures have been so infected with sin that what is evil often looks good to us.
Right, so the problem with same-sex attraction, or the feeling of being gay, you started to move forward with the act of sinning, yet have gone back to including their feeling of being gay. You're trying now to conflate the two together here. If you're gay, it's okay, you're allowed to exist. However, the activity of homosexuality and the feeling of being gay has its roots in sin. Let's use a few different words here. If you want to eat cake, that's okay. However, if you eat the cake, that's not okay. Oh, and if you feel like you want to eat the cake, that's not okay either, but remember, it's okay to want to eat the cake. it's very important that you know that it's okay to want to eat the cake, but also to not feel like you want to eat the cake. There's a very, very significant difference there. He is so desperately trying to make his point sound valid to people who genuinely accept LGBT plus people, while also standing against homosexuality as a whole, not just as an activity. What makes this worse is that he brings in evil directly.
Our natures have been so infected with sin that what is evil often looks good to us.
As long as it's consensual, it's not evil. And wait, we're clearly talking about butt fun here, right? AKA sodomy in the Bible, though sodomy covers more topics. This isn't just about kissing and hugging, otherwise that's just culture sometimes. Kissing, two cheeks as a greeting, same sex or otherwise, isn't a problem here. However, butt fun is at least the furthest regarding this topic, I think. So, I have to ask, is butt fun okay when it's a man and a woman? There's nothing in the Bible that says anal is evil or a sin, unless it's just a man with a man. Why would it be evil only with the men? That doesn't make sense. If it's the act that's evil, or the activity that's evil, then it's the activity that's evil, not whether it's with men or women.
Sin causes us to see the world and our own actions through a warped perspective. Our thoughts, desires, and dispositions are all affected. Scripture says we are sinners by nature, so same-sex attraction per se is not always an active, willful sin, but it springs from the sinful nature.
I need to ask, if sin causes a warped perspective and we're all sinners, how do you know the Bible isn't the product of our sinful nature? God didn't write it, humans did. Sinful humans. There's no way to tell if it was their sinful nature or God's inspiration. Even then, it's been changed, it's translated with many different versions. Maybe one is right and the others are not. What if they all have additions made without God's inspiration? Even when you follow the Bible, you cannot know for sure what is following God's morals or not. I think I'm going to leave that pin right there at the front, because he's kind of focusing it on homosexual people and they have a warped perspective, but from his own worldview, everybody is a sinner. Therefore, everyone has warped perspectives because of sin. Even his own perspective, he is admitting, is warped.
Some people who admit to having thoughts of being gay are, for a variety of reasons, not romantically attracted to members of the opposite sex. Instead, they yearn for intimacy with someone of their own gender. The causes for this same-sex attraction, humanly speaking, are varied and under discussion, but the fact remains that this temptation is real.
Starting with some people admit is again that loaded language we spoke about at the beginning. Saying admit here rather than say or express or many other options, admit implies guilt. As for the varied causes, it doesn't really lead into the way that homosexuality is a choice. There is a consensus that homosexuality is not a choice, no matter what the varied causes are. There are genetic, biological, and epigenetic factors, with twins that have been studied that suggest a heritable component, and prenatal hormone exposure affects sexual differentiations in the brain, and some evidence even suggests switches in gene expressions play a role, and probably many, many more. However, the social and environmental aspects are less influential than biological. But human sexuality is an extremely complex topic. It's definitely not something you can just turn off or ignore. Either you accept and express, or you stay silent and suffer. That is the only choice available, and the only choice you're trying to force homosexual people to make just because you think it's evil. Oh, I'm sorry, your book thinks it's evil.
Many who struggle with same-sex attraction report suffering through years of wishing things were different. People may not always be able to control how or what they feel, but they can control what they do with those feelings. And we all have the responsibility to resist temptation.
Yeah, but the biggest question is why? Here's a guy. If I said you must resist the temptation to marry a woman and live with her for the rest of your life, you'd likely ask me for justification, right? So what's your justification?
we must all be transformed by the renewing of our minds and take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ. 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 5.
I'm sorry, but I prefer a stronger sense of pacifism than Christ. I'd prefer someone who brings peace, not a sword. But what I or you prefer is not important to random people who want to enjoy the only life that we know we have. It's not a valid justification for why.
The second part of this question is it's sinful to engage in homosexual activities because of same-sex attractions has a more straightforward answer. Being drawn toward a morally forbidden relationship is not an active sin, it is a temptation. Sin occurs when we dwell upon the wrong thoughts, the temptation spawns, or when we yield to the temptation. Feeling a same-sex attraction is not an active willful sin, but yielding to that proclivity and engaging in homosexual relations is.
There we go. He finally said it. Attraction is not a sin. You can be attracted to the same sex, but you cannot engage in the activity. You can want to eat the apple, but you cannot actually eat the apple. Now, I can answer that very important question at the beginning. Dogma or bigotry? Well, you see this guy on screen, he's been there a little while now, yabbering on, claiming what is sinful or not based on the Bible. Well, let's go, shall we? Number 1, wearing mixed fabrics. Now, I'll admit that I cannot tell the composition of those fabrics. However, you can clearly see they're stitched together, which is mixing fabrics. Leviticus says this is a sin. And so does Deuteronomy, kind of. Number 2, shaving and trimming of beard. This one's even more clear, and unless that's a naturally growing beard, which I very much doubt, but maybe, that's also a sin. Wearing women's clothes and accessory, which is in Deuteronomy. You see, I'm not so sure that pearl-like bracelet is for men. I mean, the truth is that it is subjective. You might argue that that bracelet is for men, and you might say that it's about clothing and not accessories. Then we can look at why Jesus wears a dress. However, it is subjective. High heels, makeup, and those French berets were all men's clothes before socially considered female attire. And that's just what I can see from this video of him sat in a seat, 3 sins that he is committing. And the worst thing is, these sins are from the same part of the Bible as the homosexuality is a sin. But by the way, that includes many others, like eating pork, eating shellfish, shrimp or lobster, eating certain birds, eagle, vulture, raven or stork. Tattoos are forbidden, gossip is forbidden, hatred toward your neighbour is forbidden, consulting mediums or necromancers is forbidden, disrespecting the elderly is forbidden, which, by the way, would also include homosexual elderly people. Sex during menstruation is forbidden, working on the Sabbath is forbidden, and making idols is forbidden, even though Christians like to wear crosses around their necks. Why the issue with homosexuals, but the others can be ignored? I mean, you could just say that some of these are silly to go through and some of them are just obviously wrong, but ultimately, they're in the same part of the Bible. These are all on the same level of sinfulness. Well, you see, because if it were just dogma, this guy would have to uphold a very different appearance and a completely new lifestyle. One he's probably not so comfortable with. I mean, who can give up bacon? See, in his mind, it's okay to push the sins that don't apply to himself. It doesn't matter if they apply to others that you don't want to see in public anyway. This is bigotry. I mean, for sure, it's both. But it's bigotry that's being pushed here, not just the dogma. Because he's got a list of sins, and he's only picking out the ones he likes. He's ignoring the rest. Basically, he's using the Bible and sins as a shield for his beliefs. Yes, in quotation marks. He might claim that he's a Christian, he might be one. But ultimately, he is picking and choosing what God's law is.
Our culture assures homosexuals that they were born gay, and that confused sexuality is to be celebrated, not overcome. Thus, we have an entire generation of children and teens who never knew a time when homosexuality was rightly considered abnormal.
No, our culture doesn't assure people are born gay. Our culture understands that, but it's actually the science and data that assures us. And yes, celebrate who you are, because there are some people out there with unjustified negative views towards it, and celebrating it is a way to show people that it's not a negative thing. But I do understand that it's not really a positive thing either. It's just a thing. Ironically, both me and this guy likely can't wait for the day where we stop celebrating it. However, we would mean it in a very different way. You see, he would probably want it so that he stops seeing it publicly. I want it to stop so that we don't have to tell people it's normal anymore, because people just accept that it is a normal part of human populations. He stated it's rightly considered abnormal. But why is it? It exists throughout history, it exists throughout life, it exists all over the world, and it exists among many different species. It can't be the activities because those activities can be done with the opposite sex as well. So what makes it specifically abnormal or any relevance to evil regarding the same sex?
In elementary and middle schools, it is now fashionable to call oneself gay or bi or use any number of other faddish sexual labels without any real understanding of their meaning or of the moral and eternal implications.
I've never heard of gay people using gay as a fashion statement. I have seen it at my old school. Quite a while ago now, to be fair. Someone was accused of being gay because they acted and sounded that way. People often accused them as if it was something bad. Ironically, they weren't even gay. The label was put on them by others. Some people go gay and then go back to being straight, if you like. They explored their feelings and experiences and learnt more about themselves. If you put your prejudice aside and think for a minute, that's actually a good thing. They were straight the whole time, but they didn't know. Now they do. No one knows if they're gay or straight at first. They have to find out. For some, finding out is easy, but for others it's not so much, and that's okay. It's definitely not a trend or a fad. I mean, you literally said the modern version has been around 50 years. I can't think of any trends or fads that last 50 years. It kind of defeats the point if it's a trend that doesn't go away. But it's not just that. Being gay may be celebrated in modern times, but that, as I said, was to counter the negativity involved. And many know that schools are one of the worst places for this kind of negativity. Imagine the idea of, I'm going to get popular by being the target of intense ridicule. It's a ridiculous claim that shows the claimer has no idea of the harm they cause by spreading this misinformation. And what are the moral and eternal implications? Homosexuality isn't a moral issue. It's not immoral or even moral. It's amoral, meaning without morals. As for the eternal implications, how does being gay affect you when you live your entire life, or if such a thing exists, any form of afterlife? It's just your version of an afterlife where people unjustly go to hell in an extremely immoral fashion. What if people just become ghosts and roam the earth eternally? I have just as much reason to believe that than you do for the Bible's afterlife. And if I was right with that statement, then I'm sure there are gay ghosts out there, happily living their afterlives to the fullest.
We are all sinners, born with a nature that wants only to please itself. The sinful desires within us vary from person to person, but the root is the same. When we realize how broken we are...
And so on and so forth. This is it, and afterwards it is just carrying on the same stuff. This homosexuality type of ranting is a part of a created problem that isn't really a problem. But don't worry, they have the solution to this not an actual problem. They have created this issue that's going on underneath the surface of things, and they're the only ones that can sell you the solution with their religion. Essentially, they use homosexuality to advertise their religion and to sell snake oil. You see, there are alternative solutions. There are many people who believe in God and are also gay and, don't hide it and suffer their life. They choose to express it and live their life whilst also being a theist. They just don't think it's a sin. Or, you could go with my idea of the root, which would be the definition of sin, meaning misses the mark of God's will, or go directly against God. But what if the Greeks were right? Apollo, the ancient Greek sun god, is a god that would bless homosexual relationships. So even assuming a God exists without extra knowledge that we just don't have isn't justification to force people into a lifelong suffering just because you have the belief that it's icky.